make a mistake, hate the mistake, then fix the mistake. And that's the beginning. That's not the end. It's the beginning because it's such a simple statement and it immediately takes the self-loathing out of the equation. It's not make a mistake, hate yourself, hate the outcome, right? It's make a mistake, hate that mistake, then go fix it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the NGA podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Grady, and I am here with my incredible co-hosts,
Dr. Ian Kreider,
Mike Nador,
Rob Axelrod.
All right, so today we are kicking off our brand new mental mastery series, and we're excited to dive deep for the next few months into mindset, confidence, and mental training that's going to help our athletes perform at their best. So we are joined here for the series with our very special guest, E.G. Hathaway, who brings years of experience in coaching and gym leadership and has a passion for incorporating mental training into gym culture. So this is one of the main reasons that we have him here. I want to pick his brain and see how he's built this thriving environment in his gym and purposely put in mental training into the daily routine. So thank you, EG, for being here.
Of course.
Okay. So I think that across the board, gymnastics knows that mental training is taking a huge part into how we work with our athletes now, but it's difficult to incorporate it. So EG, I think the part I want you to start with is how you realized the importance of putting mental training in and how you started incorporating that, because it's difficult to do it. You kind of have to gradually build it up to see what works.
Sure. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, or most people that I've talked to are concerned in multiple disciplines, not just gymnastics, most sports are 85 to 90% mental. Obviously, gymnastics is a lot of physical, but it's funny, even when I ask our 9s or our 10s or other gyms what they think that percentage is, they say 85 to 92. At some point, it's between your ears. You can do the stuff. Maybe you don't believe you can or whatever that is, right? So I was getting frustrated, like all of us get frustrated. It used to be back in the day, and we all remember, you just told them what to do and they did it. And you said do it or else, and they did it. And maybe that wasn't the healthiest way, but it did get a certain amount of result. But so now things are different. And Rob, you were talking about it earlier. You can't force them. So how do you get them bought into new mental processes? Because what I was finding is that the mental process is all over the map. For instance, especially female athletes. So before puberty, female and male athletes have about the same amount of negative thoughts about themselves or the world in general. Right? After puberty or at puberty, much different. I found that the female athlete or female in general hates everything. Right? I hate my shoes. I hate my parents. I hate my nails. I hate my boyfriend. Everything hates. Right? Oh, there had to be a better way of thinking. And so it started with, I just was wondering what they were thinking, which we'll talk about in a little bit or another episode.
Oh, that's frightening. That's a frightening question to ask there.
The answers
I'm
are
glad I'm
all
here
over
to
the
confirm.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah. So if you click through the slide there,
Yeah.
So if it's 85 to 90% mental sport, then why are we only devoting 5% of our time to it? I'm not saying we need to devote 80% of our time to it, but I'm saying we need to take a harder look at things we're missing. I mean, and you can see the pictures of the people here. There's a reason that 5% of the people do 95% of the winning. It is what it is. How many times do you go to Worlds or, the same 4 girls win vault, even though there's 20 girls that are that good in the room? That's what it is. I was trying to figure out why that is and how that is, and that's what led me to this.
Yeah, because like what you said earlier, where it's so easy to swing the pendulum from super intense coaching that probably wasn't the healthiest to apathetic coaching, right? It's really easy just to swing all the way and go, well, if you don't care, I don't care, and I'll babysit you for a couple of hours and get paid and get out of here. And that's obviously not the way we want to go either. So I'm glad we're talking about this because there is a better way to do it. There is some other things to focus on, and this will be fantastic.
Yeah, and it's like the moving it to practice, I think, is the hardest part for people. When we discuss it, it makes sense. Like a lot of the things that we're going to discuss, it's going to seem like common sense to a lot of people. Of course, that makes sense to do this. But putting it into practice is very different. There's a lot of trial and error, and there's a lot of frustration. So it's like when I talk to my athletes about doing mental training, I tell them that you're not going to get the same effect as doing strength and conditioning. Muscles hurt, so you know that you're building muscles. But when you're building and training your brain, responds differently. You might cry more. You might get angry, get upset easier, frustrated. Like you're going to have these emotional responses to brain fatigue. And the same goes with our coaches. So when you're trying to implement this stuff and to change how you've been doing things automatically for years of coaching, depending on how long you've been doing it and a part of your training, it's going to feel very difficult to make those changes. And you're going to have the same types of emotional responses. You're still going to get frustrated. So there's a lot to it when it comes to practice. And I can see why people want to give up without really even starting, because it does take a lot of work.
Yeah,
It's
that's a great point. That's not something that I think gets brought up. Most of the time, probably just because people aren't working on mental mastery stuff. But man, how important is that little nugget that Becca just said about, hey, your gymnast might get more emotional or they might get more angry or something like that along the lines when they're training their brain. And yeah, that's awesome.
Well,
Start
they
off
need
your
to feel those
conversation with
things.
that with your kids.
They need
Yeah.
to feel those things to learn how to navigate them, not just for gymnastics, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if we are sheltering them from those things or just sidestepping them, then we're not really teaching them how to be even adults, to be honest. Forget gymnasts. So it's important that they go through those emotions and learn how to deal with them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's really important that they get to have their emotions, but they also need to be careful to not let their emotions drive their practice, right? And that's part of the whole training there, and the
Sure.
mental mastery of training that we're trying to get them to understand. Like, yeah, you're going to get frustrated, but that doesn't have to drive your practice. That my entire practice is going to be frustrating today. Maybe it's only a minute or two, or maybe it's just on this one skill, or maybe we walk away and we approach it differently. We go do a little drill, get a little review for our brain, and go back. But if they can continuously run through those different emotions, from anger or frustration to upset to crying to negativity, then that to me lets me know that they're letting their emotions run their entire day, not just
Yeah.
practice. It's their whole day.
And I kind of love that you brought that up, because that comes in two parts. Like, one is awareness. And as adults, it's sometimes very hard for us to be aware of what our emotional variability is. And for kids, that's even more so. So even though we're training them in this mastery, the awareness of seeing that they're doing it. So if you can point it out in a kind way, like, hey, so I'm seeing you kind of fluctuating a lot, like that's a big deal. But then teaching them how to cope, because a lot of times kids, even adults, we can tell that we have that awareness. We're like, oh my gosh, I'm like a roller coaster with my emotions today. But they don't actually know what to do to reel them in a way, to be like, okay, well, how do I lessen this? How do I catch it earlier? What can I do to be able to get back into training versus letting my emotions control? So that was great, Rob. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
my
it's super
girls.
important, like you said about EG. Like you said, being aware of it and 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 spotting it. First off, when the athlete walks into the building, for the day, I have a day group, so they get here between like 1:15 and 1:20. We're supposed to start at 1:30, and all of a sudden it's 1:30, it's 1:35, and they're kind of dragging themselves in. It's like, well, how are they presenting themselves right off the bat? Are they wearing those emotions on their sleeves before we even start the day? So being self-aware of that, and sometimes I'll just give a quick little hey, and I just circle my face like, hey, change your face. You change your face, you can change your attitude. You change your face, you can change your emotions. That's a start to helping them to realize that, hey, your body language is speaking volumes for you walking in the door. So
My girls, I mean, obviously my girls have been through this program because it's my program. But even my girls the other day, they were getting kind of frustrated and angry, and it's that time of year, and why can't I do my full routine yet, and all that. So I just had to remind them, like, look, if you're chasing perfection, good luck, right? Technical perfection is not what you're after, but the process can be perfect. And then they stopped and they looked at me weird. And so we chatted about that a little bit, which we can chat about it as we go through the slides, but it's not practice makes perfect. It's not perfect practice makes perfect, which we
right,
thought for a while. It's the process is perfection, but there's
yeah.
mistakes involved in that, right? And so the frustrations are okay to feel as long as you're thinking through them properly, which is what this is about.
I had the opportunity to have Alex Nador, Mike's son, here at our Ariel's team camp. We always do some question and answers and things like that, and we talk about how hard were things mentally getting ready. And one of the greatest things I think I'll ever take away from what Alex said was that out of all the years of training and being an Olympian, I can tell you on one hand how many practices I've ever walked away from feeling that, man, every event was awesome. And
Right.
everybody kind of looked at him. And we as coaches looked at me and said, yeah, five in his whole life did he ever
Right.
hit all 6 events for the day and walked away feeling like on top of the world. So, I mean, that's an Olympic level athlete that's sharing some really good information for other athletes that are just doing level 6 gymnastics, and it's like, hey, just like EG said, you can't expect perfection. If you're waiting for perfection, then forget it. Because even all those pictures back on the slide of those 4 athletes that you had up there, I mean, there's some awful failures that came along with their successes.
Well, yeah.
Well,
I mean,
Or just
famous
some,
Jordan quote,
or so,
right?
yeah,
and
Michael
all those
Jordan.
athletes, what's so amazing is that I think all of them have come out with vulnerability, saying where they've had problems, where they've made mistakes, the issues, the challenges they've encountered, and how they sought help for that. So that's
Uh,
pretty great.
Alex has a very high self-image in a good way, and it does border on cocky and arrogant, and we'll talk about that later, but that's what it takes to be a great
Well,
athlete.
yeah,
Of this
if you
level.
think that it doesn't take that, we just talked about that this week in the gym, about having some kind of self-awareness, arrogance in I'm walking into this competition knowing that I'm going to do well and that, other kids are going to have to come get me to beat me, and like, that's not a bad thing. That's a great mindset to have.
He thinks he's going to win everything he does, and guess what? He ends up doing it
Yeah.
because he thinks he will. But anyway, so this slide, obviously Kobe, right? But all the people that I chose, like you said, high-level athletes. And this quote really got me, right? When talent meets talent, talent's no longer enough. Famous college coach, college athlete, talking to incoming freshmen, hey, you may have been all city, you may have been all state, but there's 10 of you here, and you all were. So what happens now, right? So let's move ahead and see what the next
Yeah.
slide is. Right.
Yeah,
All right.
Age, if I can jump in just for a minute, because you guys were just talking about the athlete. Obviously, men and women are different, but
Yeah.
you talked about that kind of that arrogance, but and it's a mindset of thinking that you can win, but you have to train yourself to do that. You have to be the one that says in the gym, well, I'll back up. You as a coach, your hardest job is to motivate your athlete to motivate themselves.
Right.
And in doing that, they take control of themselves, and they also take control of their attitude within the gym, because that's a huge part of it. When an athlete, you can use Alex as an example, but any of the top athletes in different sports, when they walk into the arena, they know that they're going to win. And they also know that just them being there is going to intimidate some of the other athletes on the floor. And that's part of the game, believe it or not. It's that
sure.
game of, okay, I'm going to take second place because so-and-so is here. But you is that, in that mental training that you're doing and motivating yourself to be a good athlete, you're also building that strong self-image. And that is that arrogance, if you will, going into the competition arena or just going into the daily workout. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Well, gamesmanship is part of the equation, and the psych out is too. If you're thinking about me instead of thinking about you and your process, then I've already beat you, right? So
Yeah, Mike was famous for that. I mean, the things that he would say during the game to other players was amazing to me, that he actually spoke like that on the court, but that was part of the game.
Larry Bird too, but his was a little nasty.
Yeah,
right?
Larry's wasn't as nice as Michael's. Michael's just kind of.
Well, you kind of take on this persona. Like Mike was saying, I just watched in Masterclass this, I forgot her name, but if I can remember it, I'll drop it in. But she discusses leadership and the power of nonverbal communication. And when you're going into competitions like that, how you hold yourself brings in that that confidence, and how it can help reduce self-doubt. And you kind of have to create and practice it, like Mike said, to have this help you with your competition, so you're not having that anxiety and self-doubt creep in.
Yeah, we spoke last year a little bit about, our motto for the year was just do gymnastics, right? And so I've always told my athletes a long time ago, all through the way, maybe not even knowing I was a little bit ahead of my time for what I was thinking, but was, listen, if you can just go do what we do in the gym, at competition, it will be good enough to win. You don't have to have that, win at all cost mentality. Like, you got to go to this meet, you got to win vault. Your vault's the best. You're going to win vault. How about just go do gymnastics? And guess what? If you do what you do in training, it will be good enough to win.
It's very similar to what's coming up in some of the upcoming slides. That's results-based thinking, and that will never be consistent or good for you because it's variable. The results are always variable, but that'll come later. So this particular slide I chose because we were talking about perfection and we were talking about the process. And when I talk to my girls very early on, teaching them these strategies, and we talk about what we call the rule of thirds. And I can't remember where I got it, whether it was a ex-student of mine or a coach from a different discipline or what it was. But rule of thirds basically is if you're chasing perfection, if you're perfect all the time, then you're not challenging yourself enough. If you suck all the time, then you're not in the right zone either. So rule of thirds would be a third of the time my turns are meh, a third of the time my turns are great or exceptional even, and a third of the time they suck, right? Like they're bad. I crash or whatever it is. And so I try to remind them, look, if you're in that zone, that's where you want to be. Don't be upset about that zone because that's what's going to make the most progress in the shortest amount of time for you. Right. So we try to stay within the rule of thirds. And so if they have a bad turn and they get down and they're kicking the equipment or, well, they're not boys, they're crying or whatever they're doing. Hey, rule of thirds. Yeah. And they give me that like, yeah, I heard you for the 100th time, but they get it and we move on. I think it's important that they understand that's what we were talking about. The process is perfect, not the outcomes. So
yeah, I think to kind of break that down, that's within the workout itself. And that is before you can win, you have to lose. You have to lose a lot before you can win sometimes. And, to bring it to the competition, I trained an athlete, Jason Gatz, an Olympian. And when he was younger, he would win everything. And he'd be so nervous after the competition from the pressure of having to win because he always wins. He would actually physically get sick and throw up. And, his parents were a little pushy and they just say, he just always wins. He's a winner. And I talked to him. I said, you don't get it. He's going to have to lose before he can actually ever win big. Long term, he's going to have to lose because you have to understand in the gym, the difference of and it's okay to fall, like you said, a third of the time and not do well, because that's how you learn to be great and what a great turn feels like. And the same thing goes with competition. My son Alex used to say, and he still says stuff like this, but he goes, it's not that I mind not winning, but I just hate losing, was his comment. And it's a very interesting concept that you have to feel both sides. You have to feel the losing side and you have to feel the winning side to really know what you want to go after and how you want to go after that. And I like the way you broke it up into the thirds because that's a reality of in the gym and also in competition sometimes.
Well, I agree with you. And Alex and I, for those of you who don't know out there, Mike was my coach. I grew up in his program. We coach very similar. I still call him to ask him advice on stuff. And I coached Alex for a while and when he was younger, and Alex and I are still friends. And we were talking about that recently. It's not that I love winning. It's that I hate the feeling of losing. So you have to learn how to, and they did go out there, and both Jason and Alex did go out there and lose at some point, right? Lose for them is, fourth or fifth, but I mean, still they want to be first. So they had to feel that sting and take it back to the gym. So that leads right into, I wish I would have done this slide a little different, but reframing mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I start with the first one in yellow here, and I tell them, look, make a mistake, hate the mistake, then fix the mistake. And that's the beginning. That's not the end. It's the beginning because it's such a simple statement, and it immediately takes the self-loathing out of the equation, right? It's not make a mistake, hate yourself, hate the outcome. It's make a mistake, hate that mistake, then go fix it. And so we pull the self-loathing out of the equation. That's the very, very beginning for me. It's probably the first thing I do. After asking what they're thinking. But it's probably the next thing I do to start removing some of the self-doubt and self-hatred.
Yeah,
that's a big thing for
so
girls.
important. Yes.
They attach those mistakes instantly to their self-identity. And I'm like, whoa, no. Mistakes, those are just problems to solve. That's what we're working on. It has nothing to do with you. You are amazing, awesome, always.
Yep. Well, and it starts
that's the big thing I'm working on with my girls right now in the gym is, hey, they'll just all the time they get done with the turn. Oh, that was a bad one. Like, all right, hang on, right? So we've now outlawed that saying, and instead they have to say, all right, well, that if it was bad, it was, well, that was low, or that was, I missed the bar, or whatever it is. They actually say the mistake, not just, oh, that was a bad turn. Because
Right.
bad turn equals I'm bad at gymnastics. But
Yep.
if it's, oh, I was too low on that one, well, then what's the fix for that? And so that's what I'm currently working on is, all right, you're no longer allowed to say that was bad. It's okay. That was an actual different word. It would be nice if they could come up with something good as well, but one thing at a time.
Baby steps.
So that being the first step, from there, once they start to get that, and keep in mind, going through this program with my girls, just the first time around took me a month. We did some exercises each step of it, and we'll talk about that when we get to implementation. But, you move from hating the mistake to reframing the mistake as data. Mistakes are opportunities. Okay. So you want to make mistakes like we were saying, and like Mike was saying, if you don't make mistakes, then where's your data? Or if you balk, I have a balker. Okay. And as much as we all hate that and say it's not going to happen in our gym, some girls will just do that. And I just looked at her and I said, did you get any information from not going? What do you mean? Did you get a correction? Well, no. Yeah, because you didn't go. Right? What are you scared of? That conversation happened. Next turn she tried. It wasn't great. And I said, look, you went, right? Now you have data. Okay. Yeah. You didn't get your feet in front of you. Yeah. Whatever. Doesn't matter what the correction is. It's reframe the mistakes. Okay. And eventually we do what's called embracing the mistakes. We welcome them. We're hunting them. My girls will hunt mistakes. And that's one thing that I'm proud of them for, that they've learned to do. So it just, like you said, got to screw up got to lose to win. So there's some things that we have to get through. And however far we get today, we get. But there's some things that we have to chat about before we can talk about implementation. Levels of competence are important, understanding that, and the difference between workout mindset and competitive mindset, and how those things are not the same. They can be similar, but they're not the same. Self-image versus ego, that's important. We talked about that a little bit with cocky versus arrogant. Those border very closely on each other. Too far one way or too far the other way is no good. And then on-demand performance. So what you're thinking in the gym versus what you're thinking in a meet. Most people have seen this. If they haven't, it's here for them. I'm sure we've all seen this and talked about it, but it's important to get out there. So a lot of my girls still, the younger ones especially, are subconsciously incompetent. So subconscious incompetence would be that you just don't know what you don't know, right? How many times do you tell a girl, hey, you need to do that? I know. Okay, cool. You do you, boo, right? But they just don't know, okay? So it's not their fault. They just aren't aware. And when we do the same thing, we all go through these processes, right? When I play golf competitively in my 30s, I thought I knew everything and I didn't know anything, right? Or whatever I do now. Some of you know what I do now. Mike, you see my Instagram, but thought I knew what I was doing, didn't know what I was doing. So at some level, there has to be a light bulb that goes off to move them to conscious incompetence, meaning, okay, I know you said this a bunch of times. I've been trying it my way. It's not working. Maybe. I don't know. The realization that I don't know, or I might need coaching, or I might need help, or I might need guidance or steering, or whatever we want to call it. They need to know that they don't know. And if they don't move to that step, the rest isn't happening. And then after that, there's conscious competence. You acquire a skill or a technique or whatever, but you still have to have a conscious mental focus on it, whatever that may be. Whatever and I'm not talking visual cues. I'm talking like, oh, I have to, get behind the bar a little more, or I have to put my toes down, or whatever it is. There's a thought involved, and there needs to be a thought involved, or you can't do it without it. And
Yeah, I
then
think that conscious competence usually comes with the statement, oh, that worked. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I usually joke around with my girls. I'm like, yeah, every once in a while I know what I'm talking about. I won't say every time, but sometimes.
You kind of know.
And the goal is to push all of their skills. And my girls talk about this. We talked about it last week. The goal is to push all their skills or routines or combinations of skills or whatever to subconscious competence as much as you can. You have mastery of that and you can do it effortlessly, maybe with just a visual cue or no thought at all. Sometimes no thought works too. We can talk about no thought versus one thought later. But when you can move things to subconscious competence, when you're competent that way, then it's much easier to be successful because you don't have to think about my toe doing this on this skill and my hand doing this on that skill. And then I got to do that and then drop on this one. And you have, 20 thoughts for an 8-skill routine. That's fine.
Well, while he's trying to get that figured out, kind of what he's talking about is acquired over a lot of repetitions.
Mhm.
And where the athlete no longer has to think about the skill and all the corrections their coach is giving them. They just have that muscle memory and everything starts to work, and they don't have to think about the skill anymore. They just know how to do the skill and how to master it, because they've mastered that skill. But those things take a lot of repetition over and over again before they hit that level of mastery.
Mhm.
And I think they all go through those steps that E.G. is talking about to finally get to that point where you don't even have to tell them to point their toes, because that's part of the skill. Everything they do is part of the skill. Whereas before you had to say, keep your arms straight, lock your knees out, point your toes, make sure your body stays hollow. They were thinking about all these things, and now they don't have to think about it. It's mastered, and they've got that muscle memory, and they don't have to think about all the corrections that you used to give them, because now they've implemented those corrections. They've done them so many times, they don't have to think about it. It just happens.
They're not stuck in the conscious competence stage because
Mhm.
they want to be
These
in
are
the subconscious
overthinkers.
competence. Well, not well. I think I see a lot of underthinking actually,
I do
where
see that too, yes.
where they think they're in the subconscious competence, right? They think that they can just do the skill automatically, and you're like, "What were you thinking about in that turn?" Nothing. I was like, "Yeah, that's why nothing happened." Right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
got
the
to think
conscious
about that.
competence stage.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And that's what I run into too. You're going to oscillate back and forth between these stages. Like,
Yeah, I used to say you feel the skill. They don't think about the skill, they feel it, and they can do it correctly. But it takes time to get to that point.
There is, right? Something has to steer the subconscious, and we'll get to that. That's part of this too. But before we move on to the self-image stuff, I wanted to get through the conscious versus subconscious and just some concepts for the people out there, or that we can chat about. Your conscious mind, your frontal lobe, whatever you want to call it, right? Part of your brain that's responsible for conscious thought really can only handle one complex task at a time. I don't mean like texting and driving. I mean like gymnastics skill upside down, death involved possibly, right? That's complex. Yeah. So it really can only have one thought, one process going on there. Too many clouds everything, and you might get none of it. What are you thinking? Well, I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about that and I'm thinking about, that's too many things, honey. Pick one, please. One. Okay. And you push that to the subconscious, and then you move to another one. And so you just take one at a time and you shove it from the front of the brain to the back of the brain. And the subconscious is a pretty amazing thing. I'm constantly amazed by it and what it can do and what it knows. It's somehow a master of physics, even though I don't understand all of physics. But, it can run a lot of automatic processes at the same time. All right. If you're steering it properly, those 6 thoughts that you had, if you push them to the subconscious, it can handle them. Right. So that's the point of pushing things past conscious competence. I want to do level blah, blah, blah. Okay. Do you have this? Yeah, I did it. When? Yesterday. How many times? Once. You don't have it. Right. You did it. You don't own it. All right. So we perform the best when our subconscious mind is responsible for skill, and our conscious mind is just doing some leading. And that's, like Mike said, a feeling of a visual cue. I'm visual. I'm super, super visual. It might have something to do with the fact that I shoot decent, because it's highly visual sport, right? Look, point, go. Okay. And secondary to that, I am a feel athlete as well. Always have been, but primarily visual. So for me, it's visual cues. What are you looking at? Do you look at the wall? Do you look at the wall when you said? Do you look at your knees when you said? Do you look at the bar when you pirouette? Whatever, right? And everybody's going to be different there. There's visual, there's feel, and there's verbal learners. And a lot of the times they're a combination of 2 of them.
or different on every event too.
Yeah, right. So I try to steer their mental cues towards their style, right? If you're a visual, what were you looking at? Why does it keep going out? That's driving me crazy. Hold on.
Was for station identification. UNGA.
Yeah, I don't know why that's happening, but
And
we're
a
getting
quick
to the
note
point.
from our sponsors.
So the basics of this first important piece of the puzzle were the levels of competence and how to steer them and what we're trying to get them to.
Yes.
Well, about, a lot of these are verbal cues and what you're saying to the athlete, especially at the younger athletes when they're small and you can actually put them in the correct positions and do things like that. The visual is important, but actually feeling the correct position, the coach putting them in the correct position becomes a big part of that. And that rolls into that subconscious also. I keep saying, like, the way it feels, like this is how it should feel when you're doing the skill. This is the position you should be in, and physically putting them in that position, I think, is just as important as the verbal corrections that you make, and them being able to, like you were saying, E.G., some of them are very visual, where they could watch a video and they can know how to do the skill. Where some athletes, they don't get that, and you've got to put them in the position. I would say that the former is very few. Very few athletes can watch a skill and go, I get it. Now I know what to do. Whereas most athletes, you have to put them in that position over and over again before they finally say, I get it. That's the position I have to be in to do the skill.
100%.
So you're going to work with all different types of athletes, but the putting them in the correct position is just as important as what you say and the corrections that you make to them, I think. So
I explain it to like this. Feel is subjective, right? And feel will fool you sometimes too. So you've got to put them in the position so they will feel it. I can tell you how something felt to me, or I can tell you how something feels to me. You might do the exact same thing as me, technically to the T, the same, and you might explain it completely differently. So you got to put them in it, and they have to feel it, and they have to start telling you how it feels. That's when you really start getting somewhere, right? It's just one step further than that. But yes, agreed.
Yeah, and it also, I think at the very beginning we touched on it, but maybe we didn't really hound on it enough. But it's, you have to get them out of their own negativity first and involved in the process. Because if they
Mm-hmm.
won't be involved in the process, then all this stuff just doesn't work. So it has to be this kind of partnership, especially with your older athletes. The younger ones, a lot of times you don't have that trouble. You can just tell them to do something, they do it, kind of thing, right? But especially as your athletes get older, EG disappeared again. But especially as your athletes get older, it's way more important to go. They've got to have some buy-in. They've got to have some back and forth with you. I think, we're past the, I just want little tiny robots that do what I say. It just doesn't work that way.
Well, and it's a great segue. Really, what we're talking about is dynamic self-image, and that's what's coming up next, and how to talk to them about it, and what that even is for some of the people out there to understand.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is probably a good stopping point, and we can pick it back up for the conscious versus subconscious talk. But I think what we could do is at the end of each one of these episodes would be a great idea for us to give like one tip of how coaches and athletes can start to gradually build their mental performance, especially since we're getting into season and competitions are coming up. So what's something simple that could be started within the gym right now that coaches or athletes can be doing that can assist them with just improving their focus on their mental performance right now?
there's a lot of them, but I think, and we've talked about this before, and it is trying to simulate that pressure situation a little bit for them is important to do in the gym and daily workouts, even if it's just with a skill. And I'm going back and forth on which way I want to go with this, but I think that when you're working with the athlete, male or female, it's important to, if they're mentally going to buy in, you have to explain the situation as, okay, let's pretend you're in this competition situation and you're doing this skill right now. And what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about going into the skill? And then what do you feel like after the skill? And have them tell you before they even go what they're thinking, have them perform the skill, and then tell them, and then afterwards ask them, how did that feel? Whether it's a hit or a miss or whatever. And then, okay, what can we do to improve on that? Or, hey, that was great. You had a good mindset going into that skill. And so I work on some of those things with them, just on kind of that positive self-talk before. And like I said, you can break it down to a skill or a half routine or a full routine, whatever you want to do, depending on what type of this part of the season you're in. But that's that for them to get into the correct mental mindset and have that positive self-talk, you have to kind of teach them how to talk. You have to teach them, what did you think before? Did you think during? And what did you think after? And I think if you can get them to start working on that, that will help them a lot in their performance.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I kind of said mine, but it's, that positive, you got to get them out of their own head as far as the negativity goes and then get them involved in the process. Without that, it's just going to be so difficult to even just coach them, right? It makes it much more difficult, much more frustrating for both you and the athlete. And so getting them out of their own head and into the positive mindset of, okay, this is the process. I need to follow the process. Like what EG was saying, that perfect process, not the perfect result.
Yeah, and I think when you're training in all of those situations, it needs to be as similar as possible to a competition setting, or we do distraction Thursdays sometimes. So we want to distract them and have distractions going on in the background, just like if you were at a meet. Sometimes we'll play super loud music. Sometimes you put in a bucket, 5 or 6 different distractions, and they pick which distraction they're going to get. There's super loud music. There's girls dancing around the beam, circling, chanting, ring around the rosy or something. There's little different things like that. But I will add in, and I may have said it once before, I used to coach a professional baseball player's daughter. His name was Jason Marquis. And one of the things I used to pick his brain about was how did they get prepared for games? And they would do these type of things too. In fact, on a bigger scale, they would get dressed and they would have an inner scrimmage with their team, with the lights on, with the music, with crowd noise in the background. And he said that was all fine and dandy, but baseball is about stats and they keep stats on everything. And for every single game that he ever pitched in his career, his mile per hour went up 3 miles an hour on every pitch during the game, because there's nothing like the real thing, no matter how hard we try to simulate it. But that doesn't mean that using those simulations in your gym of trying to put them in these different pressure situations is not going to be part of the process to help them be the athlete that we want them, or that we know that they can be.
I think one thing that's pretty major right now that my girls work on is hammering out what their mental cues are going to be, thinking through routines like competition, right? Putting them in a position to to invest in their process and not in the result, like had already talked about, right? Which we'll talk about some more on some more of these slides, but the outcome's always variable, and so your mood will be variable. Mental consistency creates technical proficiency. So we work on the processes and we try to hammer out what those processes are going to be. And over time, maybe they change, but they're giving themselves mental cues and a process. It's not about results. It's about the process.
And I guess my last thing is that I'm going to kind of direct mine towards the athletes, but I want you to know that when you go to competition, that your nerves can make your skill become more conscious. We're thinking more about the details of our skills, and that's where we can have those competitions that just don't go well. If you are someone who does not compete well but performs at practice, I challenge you to go back and break down your skills and focus more on the specific details, or having some of those external cues, which we will discuss next time. But remember, you have to be thinking about your skill a little bit so you're not overthinking when you're at competition.
And I'll just add that I completely agree with you.
EJ, I like everything that you put together. Really good information, and it gets even me thinking about some of those things. Even though I've lived them for a long time, it takes me back to remember, okay, what did I do in this situation as a coach? And I think they kind of spark a lot of that memory and a lot of things that, as you started off, the way we coach has changed over time, and understanding the mental game that you've put together is a big part of it. And I think it's missed by a lot of coaches and athletes. So I think it's good. So yeah, good job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So EG, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for us to continue the Mental Mastery series and to keep diving into some of the things that we can give coaches and athletes to help them further improve their mental performance in gymnastics. So for the listeners, if there's a mental topic you would like us to explore, just send us a message on any of our social media platforms. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you enjoyed this episode, follow, subscribe, and share it with anyone who could benefit from the conversation. And as always, thank you for joining us here at the NGA podcast, and stay happy, healthy, and high performing.